There is a moment, and it is happening right now, not tomorrow, not in some distant future you keep rehearsing, but in the space between the breath you just took and the one you are about to take, where everything you thought was fixed begins to dissolve. You can feel it. Something underneath the surface of your life has been shifting, and you have been trying to name it for weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. It is not anxiety, though it wears that mask sometimes. It is not restlessness, though your body has been carrying a strange electricity that will not settle. What you are feeling is the friction of two versions of your life trying to occupy the same space, and one of them is about to give way. Stay with me here, because what we are about to explore is not metaphor. It is not wishful thinking dressed in spiritual language. It is a precise mechanism that physics has been circling for nearly a century, one that most people walk past every single day without recognizing that it is the engine behind every major turning point they have ever lived through. And it has everything to do with why your life feels the way it does right now, in this exact season, at this exact crossroads. Let me start with something that happened in a laboratory in 1999. A physicist named Ephraim Steinberg and his team at the University of Toronto ran a version of an experiment that had been troubling physicists since the 1920s. It was a variation of the double-slit experiment, but with a twist. They were not just watching whether photons behaved as particles or waves. They were using a technique called weak measurement, which allowed them to gather partial information about the photon's path without fully collapsing its behavior. What they found was unsettling even to people who had spent their entire careers inside quantum theory. The photons did not simply choose one path or another. They seemed to carry a kind of ghost of every possible path simultaneously, and the act of gathering even a whisper of information about which path was taken began to sculpt which reality solidified. Not after the fact, not as a passive recording. The observation itself was participating in the creation of the outcome. Now, most people hear about experiments like this and file them away under interesting but irrelevant. Quantum effects happen at the subatomic level, they say. They do not scale up to human life. But here is where that comfortable dismissal starts to crack. Because in the last 2 decades, an entire field called quantum biology has been quietly demolishing the wall between the quantum and the classical. Researchers at the University of Surrey demonstrated quantum coherence in photosynthesis, showing that plants use quantum superposition to find the most efficient energy pathway through their molecular structures, not at near absolute zero in a sterile lab, but at room temperature, in the wet, noisy chaos of a living leaf. If a blade of grass is leveraging quantum mechanics to navigate possibility, the idea that your consciousness, the most complex information processing phenomenon we have ever encountered, is somehow exempt from these principles is not scientific caution. It is denial wearing a lab coat. So let us take what the physics actually shows and follow it somewhere uncomfortable. Because the concept I want you to sit with tonight is not the observer effect as a neat intellectual idea. It is the observer effect as the operating system of your lived experience. And specifically, it is the mechanism behind what many traditions have called timeline convergence. The moment when the multiple possible versions of your life collapse into a single, irreversible trajectory. Think of it this way. Every morning you wake up, and in the first few seconds before your habitual thoughts take over, there is a window. In that window, you are not yet the person you were yesterday. Your neural pathways have not yet fired in their familiar sequence. Your emotional body has not yet reached for its default frequency. You are, for a few heartbeats, genuinely open. superposed. Multiple versions of you exist in that gap, each one as real as the others, each one leading to a different day, a different set of choices, a different life. And then something happens. You remember who you think you are, who you were told you are, what happened last week, what you are afraid of, what you want. And in that remembering, one version collapses into form. The others dissolve, not because they were less real, because you stopped looking at them. This is not poetry. This is what the measurement problem in quantum mechanics points to when you follow its implications honestly. The measurement problem, for those unfamiliar, is the unresolved question at the heart of quantum theory. Why does a quantum system exist in superposition, multiple states simultaneously, until it is observed, at which point it appears to choose one state? Physicists have been arguing about this since Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein exchanged letters that read more like philosophical wrestling matches than scientific correspondence. And the reason it remains unresolved is not because the math is unclear. The math is pristine. It is because the implications are so radical that most of the scientific establishment would rather invent elaborate workarounds than face what the simplest reading of the data suggests, which is that observation is not passive. Consciousness is not a spectator. It is a participant in the construction of what we call real. Hugh Everett understood this. In 1957, he proposed what became known as the many worlds interpretation. His idea was elegant and terrifying in equal measure. He said that the wave function never actually collapses. Every possible outcome of every quantum event actually occurs, but each one branches into its own universe. When you make a choice, you do not eliminate the other options. You simply stop being the version of you that experiences them. The other versions continue, in other branches, living the lives that those choices would have produced. Now, whether you take Everett literally or treat his framework as a useful map rather than a photograph of reality, the practical implication is the same. At every moment of genuine choice, you are not selecting from a menu. You are selecting which version of yourself you will continue to be. And the choices that matter most are not the dramatic ones. They are not the move across the country or the ending of a relationship, though those are included. The choices that matter most are the ones you make in the space between a stimulus and your response, the micro decisions, the ones so small you do not even recognize them as choices. There is a neuroscientific parallel here that is worth pausing on. Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s showed that the brain's readiness potential, the electrical signal that precedes a voluntary action, fires roughly 350 milliseconds before a person becomes consciously aware of their decision to act. This has been used by materialist philosophers to argue that free will is an illusion, that the brain decides and then tells the conscious mind a story about having chosen. But Libet himself noticed something the determinists tend to skip over. There is a window, approximately 150 milliseconds, between the moment you become aware of the urge to act and the moment the action is executed. In that window, you can veto, you can override, you can say no, not that, something else. Libet called it free won't. And that window, that 150 millisecond gap, is where your timeline is actually determined. Not in the grand declarations, not in the vision boards, in the veto, in the override. In the moment you catch yourself about to react from an old pattern and choose with full presence to respond from a new one. This is what it means to enter a shift. Not that the universe rearranges itself around you like furniture being moved in another room while you sleep, but that you begin to occupy a different position within the field of possibility, and from that position, different outcomes become available, not through force but through coherence. If this is resonating with something deep inside you, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next in this series. Let me explain what I mean by coherence, because this word gets used loosely in spiritual communities and it deserves precision. In physics, coherence describes a state in which waves are aligned in phase. A laser is coherent light. Every photon is synchronized, moving in the same direction, at the same frequency, in the same phase. This is why a laser can cut through steel while a light bulb of the same wattage barely illuminates a room. The energy is the same. The coherence is different. And the HeartMath Institute, which has been conducting peer-reviewed research on heart-brain coherence for over 25 years, has demonstrated something that maps onto this principle with startling directness. When the rhythmic pattern of your heart rate variability becomes smooth and sine wave-like, a state they call cardiac coherence, the electromagnetic field produced by the heart becomes measurably more organized. And in that state, cognitive function improves, emotional regulation stabilizes, and the body's physiological systems begin to synchronize in ways that are measurably different from the fragmented patterns produced by stress, frustration, or fear. I spent years doing everything right, visualizing until my head hurt, affirming until the words felt empty, and I kept getting close but never landing. Then I found the actual reason. There is something underneath all of it, quietly running the show. I am hosting a free live transmission where I walk you through exactly what that is and how to finally shift it at the root. The link to register is in the description below. Save your seat. The moment you see this, you will understand why you could not see it before. Here is why this matters for what you are moving through right now. The shift you are feeling is not a single event. It is a phase transition. And phase transitions, in physics, have a very specific signature. Think of water turning to ice. At 33 degrees Fahrenheit, you have water. At 31 degrees, you have ice. But at 32, you have something unstable. Something that is neither fully one thing nor fully another. Molecules are reorganizing. The structure is in flux. And if you were a molecule inside that process, it would not feel like transformation. It would feel like chaos. It would feel like everything you knew was falling apart. It would feel like the ground beneath you had become unreliable. Does that sound familiar? Because the disorientation you may have been experiencing, the sense that old strategies are not working, that relationships are shifting without clear cause, that your energy is reorganizing in ways you cannot quite track. These are not signs that something is going wrong. They are the signature of a phase transition in progress. And the most important thing you can do inside a phase transition is not try to force the new structure into existence. It is to stop clinging to the old one. There is a concept in Eastern philosophy that illuminates this with extraordinary precision. In Zen Buddhism, there is a term, Shoshin, which translates as beginner's mind. Shunryu Suzuki, in his seminal work, described it this way: in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. This is not a sentimental encouragement to be humble. It is a precise description of the relationship between openness and the collapse of possibility. The expert's mind has already decided what is real, what is possible, what the rules are. It has, in quantum terms, already measured. already collapsed the wave function into a single outcome. The beginner's mind has not yet measured. It remains in superposition. And from superposition, from genuine not knowing, the full spectrum of possibility remains available. This is why the shift you are entering demands something counterintuitive. It does not demand that you figure out the next step. It demands that you stop figuring, that you allow the gap between who you were and who you are becoming to remain open, without rushing to fill it with the first familiar identity that offers itself. I want to pause here and ask you something. What is the old pattern that you can feel losing its grip on you right now? What is the version of yourself that you know, somewhere beneath the noise you have already outgrown? I would love for you to put that in the comments, not because I need to know, but because the act of naming it, of writing it down where it becomes visible, is itself a measurement. It is the first step in collapsing a new possibility into form. I want to take you into a specific experience now, because this is where the understanding has to move from the mind into the body. If it is going to be anything more than an interesting idea, you forget by morning. Think about the last time you had a strong emotional reaction to something that, in retrospect, did not warrant that level of intensity. Maybe someone said something and your chest tightened before you could even process the words. Maybe you saw a message on your phone and your stomach dropped before you read it. Maybe you walked into a room and felt a wave of something, dread or excitement or defensiveness, that had nothing to do with what was actually happening in that room, and everything to do with what had happened in rooms like it years ago. That reaction is a collapsed wave function. It is your nervous system measuring the present through the lens of the past and producing the only outcome it knows how to produce. And here is the part that changes everything once you really understand it. The reaction is not you. The reaction is the residue of a measurement that was made long ago by a version of you that no longer exists in a situation that is no longer occurring. You are carrying a collapsed reality that belongs to another time, and you are projecting it onto the open field of this moment. And in doing so, you are collapsing this moment into the same shape as the old one. This is the mechanism behind the experience of feeling stuck. You are not stuck because the universe has stopped offering you new possibilities. You are stuck because your nervous system is collapsing every new possibility into the shape of an old outcome before you can even perceive it as new. The neurological basis for this is well documented. The brain's default mode network, the system that activates when you are not focused on a specific external task, spends roughly half of its activity engaged in what neuroscientists call self-referential processing. It is constructing and maintaining the story of who you are. And that story is not neutral. It is predictive. It is constantly projecting forward, using past data to anticipate future events, and then filtering incoming sensory information to confirm those predictions. This is called predictive coding, and it is one of the most well-supported models in contemporary neuroscience. Your brain does not show you reality. It shows you its best guess about reality based on what has happened before. And then it filters out anything that does not match the guess. So when I say you are entering a shift, I am not speaking in abstractions. I am pointing to a specific, identifiable process in which the predictive model your brain has been running, the one that tells you who you are, what is possible for you, and what kind of life you are allowed to have, is encountering data it cannot assimilate. The model is breaking, and the breaking feels like confusion, like anxiety, like a loss of identity, like the ground dissolving. But the breaking is the shift. The breaking is the old wave function losing its coherence so that a new one can form. Let us go deeper into the mechanism, because understanding it precisely is what gives you the ability to work with it instead of against it. In quantum field theory, the vacuum, what we think of as empty space, is not empty at all. It is seething with what physicists call zero-point energy, fluctuations in the quantum field that persist even at absolute zero, when all classical motion has stopped. These fluctuations are not nothing. They are the baseline activity of reality itself, the hum underneath everything. And from this hum, particles emerge, not from somewhere else, from the field, from what looked like nothing. The field does not create particles the way a factory creates products. The particles are the field, expressing itself in a particular configuration. Now hold that alongside something the contemplative traditions have been saying for millennia. In the Upanishads, the oldest philosophical texts in the Hindu tradition, there is a phrase that appears again and again, Tat Tvam Asi. Thou art that. The individual consciousness is not separate from the universal field. It is the field, expressing itself in a particular configuration. You are not in the universe. You are a localized expression of the universe, experiencing itself from a specific vantage point. The convergence between these two frameworks is not coincidental, and it is not a superficial analogy. David Bohm, one of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century and a close collaborator of Einstein, spent the latter half of his career developing what he called the Implicate order. Bohm proposed that the reality we perceive, the world of separate objects and events, is what he called the explicate order, the unfolded version. Underneath it lies the implicate order, a deeper level of reality in which everything is enfolded into everything else, where separation is an artifact of perception rather than a feature of existence. And he argued that consciousness and matter are not two different substances. They are two aspects of the same underlying movement, which he called the hollow movement. If Bohm is right, and the mathematics he developed to support this view has never been refuted, only ignored, then the shift you are experiencing is not happening to you. It is happening as you. You are not a person standing on solid ground watching the landscape change. You are the landscape, and the ground is not dissolving because something has gone wrong. The ground is dissolving because the implicate order is unfolding a new configuration, and the old explicate pattern, the one you called your life, is being reabsorbed so that something more coherent can emerge. This is where most people panic. And the panic is understandable, because the ego, the constructed self, the narrative identity that your default mode network has been maintaining since childhood, experiences the dissolution of its familiar pattern as death. Not metaphorical death, the neurological signature of ego dissolution, as measured in studies of deep meditation and certain psychedelic experiences, overlaps significantly with the brain's fear of death response. Your brain cannot distinguish between the death of a story and the death of the body. So when the old story starts to break apart, your system floods with the same chemicals, the same urgency, the same desperate grasping that it would produce if you were physically threatened. And this is the fork. This is the precise point where your timeline is determined. Because in that flood of fear, you have two options, and only two. You can obey the panic and rebuild the old structure, reach for the familiar identity, reactivate the old neural pathways, collapse the wave function back into the known shape. Or you can stay. You can remain in the gap, You can let the dissolution continue without grabbing for the first solid thing that presents itself. You can allow yourself to be in superposition, genuinely, experientially, not as a concept, but as a lived state. And from that openness, allow the new configuration to emerge on its own terms. I want to hear from you on this. Have you experienced that moment, that fork, where you felt the panic rising and had to choose between retreating to the old pattern or staying in the unknown? What did you choose and what happened next? Share it in the comments below. This is not passivity. Let me be very clear about that. Because there is a common misunderstanding in spiritual communities that equates surrender with doing nothing. Surrender is not doing nothing. Surrender is doing the hardest thing a human being can do, which is remaining fully present and fully engaged while simultaneously releasing control over the outcome. It is the difference between a surfer and a log. Both are carried by the wave. But the surfer is making constant micro-adjustments, reading the water, shifting weight, responding to what is actually happening rather than what they expected to happen. The log just gets carried. Surrender is surfing. Resignation is being a log, and the body knows the difference. This is something that cannot be faked at the cognitive level. You can tell yourself you have surrendered. You can use the language of letting go. But your body will tell the truth. If you are in genuine surrender, your breathing deepens, your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, and there is a quality of aliveness in your stillness, an alertness that is relaxed but not slack. If you are in resignation, your body collapses. Your breath becomes shallow. There is a deadness to the stillness, a giving up rather than an opening up. Learn to read this difference in your own body, because it is the most reliable feedback system you have for knowing whether you are actually in the shift or just performing the idea of it. If you are ready to go deeper into the signal you are already broadcasting, listen to this. Have you spent years chasing manifestation, visualizing, affirming, raising your vibration, only to watch the same patterns repeat? Every traditional method assumes the same thing, that you are separate from what you want. That separation was never real. You were chasing a signal you were already broadcasting. Beyond the frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery walks through all 9 frequencies, from the dense transmissions trapping you, through the ascending currents, to the master frequencies where consciousness becomes the field. Every method you tried sent a signal outward. This one tunes the signal you already are. Every day you delay, your nervous system broadcasts the same old signal, and breaking free gets harder. So move on it tonight. The link is in the pinned comment below. Now, let us bring this back into the practice that makes all of this real. I want to give you a practice now. Something specific you can do, not just while you listen, but in the days ahead. Because the shift we are talking about is not a one-time event. It is a sustained reorientation, and it requires a practice that you return to again and again until it becomes your default rather than your exception. Here is what I want you to try. At some point today, and then once each day for the next week, find a moment when you catch yourself in a reaction. Not a dramatic reaction, a small one. The tightening when you check your email, the flicker of irritation when someone speaks, the subtle bracing when you think about a particular situation. When you catch it, do not try to change it. Do not try to relax. Do not try to think positive thoughts. Instead, do this. Notice where in your body the reaction lives. Name the location: chest, throat, stomach, jaw. Then notice the shape of the sensation. Is it tight or diffuse? Is it hot or cold? Is it pulsing or static? And then, this is the crucial step. Ask yourself one question. Not out loud, but internally, with genuine curiosity. Is this sensation responding to what is happening right now, or to something that happened before? Do not try to answer the question analytically. Let the body answer. Because what you will find, if you practice this with honest attention, is that the vast majority of your reactions are not responses to the present moment. They are echoes. They are the collapsed wave functions of old measurements, replaying automatically, and in their replaying, they are collapsing the present into the shape of the past before you have a chance to experience it as it actually is. And the moment you see this, really see it, not as a concept, but as a lived recognition, something extraordinary happens. The automaticity breaks, not permanently, not all at once, but in that moment of seeing, a gap opens. And in that gap, you are in superposition. You are no longer the old pattern, and you have not yet become the new one. You are in the space between, and that space, that uncomfortable, groundless, identity-dissolving space, is where the shift lives. This is what the mystics were pointing to when they spoke of the dark night of the soul. Not a punishment, not a failure, a transition state. The chrysalis stage, where the caterpillar has dissolved into undifferentiated cellular soup and the butterfly has not yet formed. If you opened the chrysalis at that stage, you would not find a half caterpillar, half butterfly. You would find nothing recognizable, just potential, just the raw material of transformation, waiting for the new pattern to assert itself. And here is something about that process that most people do not know, something from the actual biology that is so precise in its metaphorical implications that it feels almost designed to teach us this lesson. Inside the chrysalis, there are cells called imaginal cells. They are not caterpillar cells that gradually change. They are entirely new cells, cells that carried the blueprint of the butterfly all along, even while the caterpillar was crawling. And when the caterpillar dissolves, the immune system of the old organism actually attacks these imaginal cells. It treats them as invaders, as threats. The old system fights the new one, and the imaginal cells persist. They find each other, they cluster, they form networks, and eventually, the new pattern becomes so coherent that the old immune response can no longer suppress it, and the butterfly emerges. Read that again in the context of your own experience. The new version of you, the one trying to emerge, is not something you need to create from scratch. It has been present all along, encoded in impulses and visions and quiet knowings that your old identity kept attacking, kept dismissing as unrealistic, kept treating as threats to the stability of who you thought you were. And the shift you are in right now is the moment when those imaginal cells are beginning to outnumber the immune response. The old pattern is losing its grip, not because you overpowered it, but because the new pattern has reached a threshold of coherence. This is what physicists would call a bifurcation point. In complex systems theory, a bifurcation point is the moment when a system that has been gradually moving away from equilibrium reaches a threshold where it can no longer sustain its current structure, and it spontaneously reorganizes into a new, more complex order. The key word is spontaneously. You do not engineer a bifurcation. You do not plan it. You create the conditions for it by allowing the old structure to become unstable, And then the new order emerges on its own, from the system's own intelligence, in a configuration that could not have been predicted from the old structure's rules. This is why trying to figure out what your new life will look like, trying to plan and the shift, trying to control the outcome, actually delays it. Because planning and controlling are functions of the old structure. They operate by the old rules, and the new configuration, by definition, cannot be generated by the old rules. It can only emerge when the old rules are suspended. When you stop trying to figure it out and allow yourself to not know. There is a term in Japanese aesthetics, which refers to the space between things, not empty space, pregnant space, the pause between notes that makes music possible, the gap between words that allows meaning to emerge. Ma is not absence. It is the condition for presence. And the shift you are in is a ma. It is the space between who you were and who you are becoming, and it is not empty. It is full of potential, but that potential can only actualize if you resist the urge to fill the space prematurely with the furniture of your old identity. Let me bring this back to something concrete, because I want you to understand the mechanics of what is happening in your daily experience right now, not just the philosophy of it. When you are in a phase transition, your external reality begins to reflect the internal instability in very specific ways. Relationships that were stable start to feel misaligned, not because the other person has changed, but because you are vibrating at a frequency that no longer matches the frequency at which that relationship was established. Situations that used to feel comfortable start to feel suffocating. Goals that used to motivate you start to feel hollow, and new impulses arise, impulses that make no logical sense from the perspective of your old identity, impulses toward things you have never done, people you have never met, ways of being you have never tried. The old structure interprets these impulses as threats. It says you are being irresponsible. It says you are having a midlife crisis. It says you are losing your grip. But the new structure, the one trying to emerge, recognizes these impulses as signals, as the imaginal cells finding each other, as the new pattern beginning to cohere. And here is the part that requires courage. You cannot verify the new pattern from inside the old one. You cannot get confirmation that the shift is real by using the old structure's criteria for reality. The old structure will never validate the new one, because the new one's existence is a direct threat to the old one's survival. This means that at some point, and you may already be at that point, you have to take a step without proof. Not a reckless step, not an impulsive step, but a step that is guided by something other than the familiar logic, the familiar fear, the familiar need for certainty. The physicist Werner Heisenberg, one of the architects of quantum mechanics, formalized this principle in what became known as the uncertainty principle. He demonstrated mathematically that you cannot simultaneously know both the position and the momentum of a particle with perfect precision. The more precisely you measure one, the more uncertain the other becomes. This is not a limitation of our instruments. It is a feature of reality itself. Certainty about where something is comes at the cost of certainty about where it is going. And certainty about where it is going comes at the cost of certainty about where it is. Apply that to your life right now. The desperate desire to know exactly where you are, to pin down your current identity, to stabilize the ground, comes at the direct cost of your ability to move. And the willingness to move, to allow momentum, to step into the trajectory of the new pattern, comes at the cost of knowing exactly where you stand. You cannot have both. The shift requires you to trade the comfort of a known position for the aliveness of an unknown momentum. This is the final timeline, not in the sense that there is only one future and it has been predetermined, but in the sense that you are reaching the point where the old pattern can no longer sustain itself. The bifurcation is happening whether you cooperate with it or not. The question is not whether you will change. The question is whether you will change consciously, as a participant, as the observer who is aware of their role in collapsing possibility into form, or whether you will change unconsciously, dragged by the current of a transition you refuse to acknowledge, arriving at the new shore disoriented and grasping for the wreckage of the old. There is one more piece I want to offer you, and it has to do with the nature of time itself, because the shift you are in is not just a change in your circumstances or your identity. It is a change in your relationship to time. In classical physics, time is a line, past, present, future, laid out in sequence, each moment causing the next. But in quantum mechanics, particularly in the work of John Wheeler and his delayed choice experiment, time does not behave this way. Wheeler demonstrated that a measurement made in the present can retroactively determine the behavior of a particle in the past. Not influence it, determine it. The present reaches back and shapes what has already happened. This is not fringe science. This experiment has been replicated multiple times, most notably by a team at the Australian National University in 2015, using individual helium atoms. The results were unambiguous. The choice of how to measure the atom in the present determined whether the atom had behaved as a particle or a wave in the past. The present was writing the past. Sit with that for a moment. Because if the present can shape the past, then the version of your history that you carry, the story of who you were and what happened to you and why you are the way you are, is not fixed. It is being continuously updated by the observer you are right now. The meaning of your past is not set. It is being determined by the consciousness that is looking at it in this moment. And if you shift that consciousness, if you change the observer, the past itself changes, not the events. The events remain. But the meaning, the significance, the causal chain that connects those events to your present, all of that is retroactively rewritten by the quality of attention you bring to it now. This is not denial. This is not pretending that painful things did not happen. This is recognizing that the story you have built around those events is a measurement. And like all measurements, it collapsed one possibility out of many. And you can remeasure. You can bring a different quality of attention to the same events and find that they yield a different meaning, a different causal chain, a different trajectory. Not because you are lying to yourself, but because the meaning was never fixed in the first place. It was always a function of the observer. So here is the practice for this understanding, and it is different from the one I offered earlier, and I want you to use them together in the days ahead. Find one event from your past that you have been carrying as evidence of limitation. A moment that you point to as proof that you are not enough, or that the world is not safe, or that good things do not last. You know the one. It lives in your body more than in your mind. You feel it before you think it. Now, instead of trying to reframe it, instead of trying to think about it differently, I want you to approach it the way a physicist approaches data, with curiosity rather than conclusion. Ask yourself, What else could this data mean? Not what do I wish it meant. What else could it actually mean if I were measuring it from a different position? And then notice what happens in your body when a new meaning begins to surface. Notice whether there is a release, a softening, a sense of space opening where before there was only density. Because that release is not you fooling yourself. That release is the wave function decollapsing. That is the old measurement losing its hold. That is the present reaching back and rewriting the causal chain, not by changing the facts, but by changing the observer who is reading them. This is what it means to enter the final timeline. Not that there is only one future, but that you are reaching the point of coherence where the version of you that has been running on autopilot, collapsing every moment into the shape of the past, is being replaced by a version that measures from presence, from openness, from the full field of possibility rather than from the narrow slit of habit and fear. The shift is not coming. The shift is here. It has been building in every sleepless night, every unexplained restlessness, every moment of sudden clarity followed by sudden doubt. It has been building in the relationships that fell away and the ones that mysteriously appeared. It has been building in the goals that stopped mattering and the callings that started whispering. It has been building in the strange, groundless feeling of being between identities, between lives, between worlds. If someone in your life is going through this same groundless feeling right now, share this with them. When two people hold awareness of these principles simultaneously, it creates a resonance field, an amplification of coherence that accelerates the shift for both of you. What takes months alone can crystallize in weeks when the signal is shared. And the only thing required of you, the only thing that has ever been required, is that you stop collapsing the wave, that you stop measuring yourself with the old instruments, that you let the superposition hold long enough for the new pattern to assert itself from within the field of your own being. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are not falling apart. You are a system at bifurcation, and the chaos you feel is the signature of a higher order trying to emerge. The imaginal cells have found each other. The coherence is building, and the old immune response, the voice that tells you this is not real, that you should go back to what was safe, that you are foolish for trusting something you cannot see. That voice is the last echo of a structure that has already lost its hold. Let it echo. Let it speak. And then let it pass. The way a wave passes through water without moving the water itself. Because you are not the wave. You are the ocean. And the ocean does not need to decide what shape to take. It simply moves, and the shape emerges. And it is always, always more beautiful than anything the wave could have planned. Stay here. Stay in the gap. Stay in the not knowing. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is true, and because the truth, even when it dissolves the ground beneath you, is the only thing that has ever been solid enough to stand on. If this reached something in you that goes beyond words, if you felt the recognition underneath the understanding, then you are already in it. You are already shifting. And the most powerful thing you can do right now is not to go looking for the next piece of information, the next confirmation, the next teacher who will tell you what to do. The most powerful thing you can do is to close your eyes, place your hand on your chest, feel the rhythm that has been beating without your permission since before you were born, and ask yourself, not with your mind, but with whatever is underneath your mind, what wants to emerge, and then listen. not for an answer, for a direction, a pull, a warmth. A quiet yes that does not need to explain itself. That is the signal. Follow it.